Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
What's up, chat?
What's up, chat? Indeed. How is the chat out there?
Hopefully it's good, chat.
Yeah.
Let us know, chat.
Yeah,
one of those
hopefully
cool
chat
things I
responds. You learned it, huh?
Yeah, I used it a lot this summer to
Yeah?
talk to my son. Anytime I talk to him, I'm like, what's up, chat? You know?
People in public start thinking you named your child Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's like started with Twitch and people talking, the streamers talking to the chat. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But feels good to be back.
Does it? It does. That's what I was thinking today. It was a longer break than I think we've had before. I was trying to do the math on that, but I'm bad at math. And I thought, it's nice to get around the table again, have a conversation about culture and Christianity. And see your smiling faces, and I'd never know what Alex is going to start the show with, so it's something I missed. But yeah, let's catch up a little bit. Today's episode's going to be kind of a little bit of a recap of what we missed. It was kind of I don't know. There were so many things. We took a break and just everything in culture happened while we were off. Yeah. And so we kind of wanted to maybe just hit a little bit on all of those things. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear maybe some of the headlines or current events or something that happened that maybe people don't know about or hadn't heard about specifically, but maybe it impacted you personally while we were gone. Anything stand out?
Are we talking about what we did this summer, or you're talking about like something that's on our brain?
Yeah. Like
because I've got both.
It could be a headline. It could be it could be personal, but like maybe something. Yeah.
One thing that is interesting that is from my world that maybe a lot of people don't know is that about 7 years ago, my husband Ben and I got into CrossFit. And so it's been a way that we've been able to connect, and it's a form of functional fitness with a little bit of competitive nature put into it. There's like daily workouts. Anyways, there's an annual event every year called the CrossFit Games. And something that he and I have been talking about recently is this last weekend, the CrossFit Games started in event one. There's a 3.5 mile run that all the athletes do. These are like the top athletes that have qualified to be here. So they're in Fort Worth, Texas.
This is like a triathlon or
Every section of the games is a workout that's built by the owners, the developers of CrossFit.
Oh, okay,
and so
gotcha. They
knew that this workout was going to be a 3.5 mile run, and then it was an 800 meter swim. And as this was going on, it was being live streamed on YouTube. Like I said, this past weekend. And one of the athletes, 100 meters from the shore, drowned.
Oh, wow.
And these are top athletes. It was live streamed. It was something where it was very shocking. And something that's just interesting about it that we've had a lot of dialogue about was there was a lot of controversy on, do we cancel the games? It's a huge thing it ends up being on ESPN, but you can stream it on YouTube. And the controversial thing was that he drowned 100 meters from the finish line, and there was also lifeguards that were well within reach of him, multiple people that were safety professionals. And so it got me thinking just even more about culture, because right away there was a lot of outrage and saying like, this person should have done this person should have done that. Yeah. And I kind of turned to myself, and something that just through our conversations on the podcast, was to slow down a little bit. Yeah. And so there's a lot of things that people posted right away. Still, there's a lot of speculation. If you look it up, the athlete's name was Lazar Dukic. And I would just encourage you to search that, kind of like see how that has gone about. There's still a lot of questions that aren't answered, but it's just interesting being a part of a community and how much we talk about how we need community, things like that.
Yeah.
Just had us thinking.
That's wild, though, especially you just wouldn't expect that from someone who's competing at that level, that they would have.
And I will say the semi-controversial part of this is that they did choose to go on with the games. And since it was the first event, that day was canceled. And there was a lot of people saying cancel the whole event, like a life was lost. But the community got to choose. So CrossFit let the athletes choose, and they were like, we want to honor this person. And so that was kind of unexpectedly woven through the weekend. But I think when we kind of like slow down and we have our knee-jerk reactions, which I think really protect us and help us get into action. But the part that processes says, okay, now what are the other options, and what does this side look to things? So
interesting.
it's just kind of something that's been on my mind over the past week.
Yeah. Alex, anything going on with you?
Well, my immediate reaction to that is wondering, and not in a comical way, but this is more comical, if Austin was today years old when he found out that CrossFit wasn't just a Bible study. If he found out it was like a workout kind of thing. And so I can't get his reaction right now, but I'm curious about that. We missed talking about producer Austin over the last
it's been
few
a
months.
while.
That's
Yeah.
what I miss most.
I'm not sure. Oh, CrossFit. Like,
Yes,
like
like
the
a Bible
cross.
study.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Jesus died on a cross.
Oh, I can see all the.
Yeah, I wasn't even
It's all
connecting
connecting.
that for me. Yeah, okay, got it. All right, sorry. Sorry, I had to explain your joke.
Thank you for doing that. I am such a
Such a
child.
dad.
I am such a dad. Speaking of being a dad, one of the things my one of my children is really into, all of them are big watchers of this show, American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah.
So the new episodes of that came out over the summer. So we watched that. They took a break during the Olympics. But fun thing was they actually compete outside of television, like in real competitions. The television show is just kind of more for entertainment. And I mean, it's fascinating, but my son got to go to an event, the world's event for Ninja Warrior Games. I don't remember the name of it, total name of it right now, Ninja Worlds. So that's fun. Got to go to that, hang out. He competed, and it like on the same kind of courses as like all of these people that you see on the show.
Yeah.
Which is kind of really cool for him because you're just like walking around. It'd be like walking around here at church in like the atrium area, and just there goes, Jesse Graff, or, some of the people that you just see on the TV show that have become, a little bit more famous for their ability to do ninja warrior stuff. So that was a lot of fun.
Wow.
Learned a lot about that world that I just hadn't, I didn't play Ninja Warrior when I grew up.
Yeah.
And as an adult, I'm still not playing it.
What was the
'cause
most
it would
interesting
destroy
thing
me.
you
The most
could tell us,
interesting
or like
thing.
something that you learned? Like you learned a lot. What was something that maybe we wouldn't, us normal folk?
Yeah, us non-ninjas.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a non-ninja. let me be very clear of that I'm a non-ninja. It was cool to realize how many of the people in just that community, because they don't really talk about it on TV, have just a really deep faith. A lot of them do follow Jesus. So there's like a meet and greet, with all the ones that have been on the show one night. And, my son wanted to go to it and, say hi to a lot of those guys and gals. And then like after the meet and greet, they like shared their testimonies. So it was just really cool to hear like their testimonies. And for me, I'm thinking, man, when I was a kid, I loved basketball, and it'd just be like getting to meet the like Michael Jordan, like the Michael Jordan of Ninja Warrior, like all those people, were there. And it's just wild how they can do those things.
Yeah.
It's just insane. And I didn't know that you never get a practice on any of the equipment.
Oh,
so that's probably one
always
thing I
wondered
learned.
that.
Like you, like literally the first time you're ever doing it is that. So you can kind of guess and create the things at your own gym, but there was this obstacle called the TikTok there. And a lot of people, they're always inserting new obstacles, trying to make it more challenging. And the TikTok, it got a lot of people.
Yeah.
It got a lot of people on all the courses because everyone runs it from 7U all the way up to the professionals, and they make it more difficult throughout, make barriers a longer way. But a lot of people, the TikTok got them. So not the app, but I think it was named after the app Ingest.
It's like a pendulum or something, or
Yeah, a big jump. Like you jump onto it, and then you swing.
No. I'm in the water already.
Yeah, it's not that though.
Oh, okay.
It's not the one you're looking up on
anything that's
TikTok.
happening, I'm in the water.
Yeah, so it was fun. It was a cool experience, and fun to watch my son be involved in that and just really like see heroes, but then hear their faith story and see how that weaves into it. So
that's cool.
Eric, please do tell.
Oh, I don't know. This summer was kind of not.
We're chomping at the bit to
didn't
hear
really
what's
do
happening.
much. Kind of. relaxed a little bit. I'm not a big, but I'm an average boxing fan. I do like watching boxing, and so I watched the Crawford fight that happened a while back. It was kind of exciting because he moved up a weight class. Omaha's own, born and raised.
Did you go when to like the downtown thing when one of the Paul brothers was here throwing out Prime?
I did not.
Like his send-off party?
Yeah, I didn't know that happened. I did not know.
Yeah, I
should
don't
have
remember
gone.
which one does the Prime?
It's Logan or
Logan. Yeah, he was here.
yeah.
His Prime sponsors Crawford.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah, I missed that. But it was an interesting fight because he moved up a weight class, and I mean, he won, but it would have been tough to be a judge on that one.
Most
'cause,
worrisome fight in a long time.
Yeah, I watch.
for him.
Usually he kind of figures his opponents out quick in the first couple of rounds and then picks them apart, but not this time. The other thing that's really been on my mind a lot is maybe I'm feeling nostalgic, but I've been thinking a lot about the Wendy's Super Bar. Did you guys remember that? Like,
I saw you posted
people-
a picture, and
yeah,
I was like,
I
back
would bring
there.
it back.
yeah, it was like a salad bar, food bar that they had at the Wendy's, and it was really not what you would have expected. But I just, it's one of those things. Like, I think people forget about it, but they had like Mexican food and pasta and salad. And the funny thing about it that I remember specifically is that on the pasta bar, they had the little spirally noodles and marinara sauce, but then the garlic bread was their hamburger buns cut in half with like butter and like garlic salt on it or something. So
I wonder if
anyways.
those were like, oh, they're about to expire.
Yeah, they just really, Dave back then was real creative. Now that we've lost Dave, I don't know, Wendy's maybe is.
They're social media managers.
Yeah,
real
yeah,
creative.
that's
so it's
true.
Carrying on the legacy in that way.
I should reach out to them and see if there's any hope because I think what got me thinking about it is people have been talking about you remember the Pizza Hut buffets?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there's certain locations where they still have like dine-in that they're bringing it back for kind of a nostalgic thing, I think. But anyways, buffets, they used to be really popular.
Salad bars in general are just feel like a.
Yeah.
I was in South Dakota a few weekends ago, and we were at a pizza restaurant, and I saw a salad bar there, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, I honestly don't remember last time I was at a restaurant and they just had it out there. I thought COVID killed it all officially.
Yeah, there's
Except for a couple.
yeah. Sometimes the buffet salad bar thing kind of freaks me out, like people sneezing on. I know they have a sneeze guard, but it's just I remember seeing a young child once sample the ranch dressing from the
Oh,
ladle
Eric.
directly to their mouth. And
Was this young child you?
no, it was not.
Oh.
But I witnessed it. Anyways, that's random tangent. But that's kind of what this episode's about. We're coming back from a break, and we're going to be covering a few other topics. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about all the historic things that happened while we were gone. The assassination attempt on Trump. Biden drops out of the presidential race, and there seemed to be quite a bit of outrage around a couple events at the Olympics. So we're going to catch up on all of that, and we'll be right back. All right, like I said before, a lot happened while we were gone, and a lot of those things kind of revolved around, the presidential campaign that's happening right now. One of those being the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and kind of what that means culturally, the relevance there.
Yeah. I think it's just wise to, anytime we are having this conversation on the podcast, just remind people, like, our hope is to talk about things that are happening in culture. Our hope is not to tell you how to think or how to vote politically. We don't have like some hidden agenda that we're trying to pull the strings at to try to usurp and get you to think exactly the way we do. But these things are happening in our culture. They're happening in our world. And as believers, like, we have to use wisdom. We need to talk about these things so that we don't fall into all the tropes or all of the stuff that's out there that's really just trying to maybe manipulate and get us to vote one way or just think badly about Scripture and use God's name in vain at the end of the day. And we'll talk more about that. But there's no agenda here. Don't assign an agenda to it, even if maybe you think differently than us. I think it's just wise for us to
Yeah.
state that. So
Yeah. So starting out with the assassination attempt, it is something that has not happened in well over 40 years at this point. I think it was Ronald Reagan in 81, the last time this happened. And I mean, just the circumstances surrounding it all have captivated Americans, I think, no matter what political party you affiliate with. It's like, how did this happen? How did they not see this shooter getting on the roof with the, it wasn't that far from where he was speaking. I'm sure many people have seen kind of even the video diagrams of how if Trump hadn't turned his head at that exact moment, that bullet would have entered the back of his skull, and it and tragically took the life of a man behind him who was covering his family and trying to protect his family. And so there's just so many circumstances circling it, and how Secret Service responded to it, and even that iconic photo that came out of it of him with his fist in the air, blood kind of running down his face, and surrounded by Secret Service who's trying to keep him down and covered, and he's chanting "fight." It's just something like that. That photo itself is going to be in my in our grandkids' history books at school. They're going to see that photo, and it's just a moment that I think what I found interesting about it is just the way people were talking about it. I mean, sure, you had your extremists on both sides, but just I think people who were kind of on the fence about who they supported and who they publicly talked about, I think it maybe swayed people in certain ways to see that response and Trump handled the situation the way he did. And so I don't know, there's just a lot there. Do you guys, any thoughts on the event specifically?
I don't remember a time where I have obsessively, swiped down on my Twitter feed just to see what is happening, and it just made me think about just the real time of all of that and how many answers we want versus even the Reagan thing, where it's just how news is and good information, bad information, how quickly all of that begins to spread, and how, news cycles, stations, and how all of that kind of stuff. I just remember being in the moment, oh, man, there's so many questions at this point. How did this happen? How did they let this happen? What is happening here? And how fast even things like that do get turned into political stuff. But I was just struck by people. It seemed like, maybe it's in tragedy, but people's willingness to, for a moment, act human, act like what's happening here. Even people that I know that despise, that have publicly, they're public figures or people I know personally, despise Trump, and I've said mean, horrible things about him, and will continue to do that. Even for a moment, we're willing to say there's no room for this. There's no room for this in politics, in our country, and all that kind of stuff. And so there's these glimpses that gave me hope in all of it, really. Too, of okay, let's be reminded about the humanity here of both people. I think at the time, there's maybe a lot of people making jokes about Biden and his health, and just a lot of the rhetoric that was happening in the moment seemed to, and very briefly, subside. And we began to remember that this isn't just a political game, that there's real people, real lives, real families in the wake of all this kind of stuff. And so it is historic, as you said, Eric. This hasn't happened, and never in my lifetime has something like this happened. And so just even the small conversations like why would someone do that, all that kind of stuff, it was just playing out in real time. It's unlike anything I can recall.
When it first started happening and I got it on my news feed, I had sent one of the first articles I saw, I had texted it to Ben as a link, and he thought that it was a Babylon Bee, a bad joke. He was trying to wrap his mind around what was happening, and he's at work. But yeah, to your guys' point, I think when things like this happen, we are recalling facts of a time when we weren't even born. And so then engaging with something that, okay, there wasn't an assassination attempt that I can look back and say, oh, JFK. It's like, this is in my time. And then it's, how do I communicate that to my kids when we've already had a lot of stuff, in particular in Nebraska, happen where it's like we had a tornado, we had have had tornadic winds, like things that are really scary. And then it's like, how do you communicate that where then they're not going, like what ended up happening to us is that happened. We went to an event where there was a lot of people and my kids are like, is somebody going to shoot me? And I think like interacting with that fear, there's a lot of, like you said, Alex, a lot of humanity that we have to interact with and see in people, no matter what side, what color if you're red or blue. And so to me, yeah, there was a lot of facts. I also, through this, have learned through watching the Secret Service director get interviewed, I emotionally would not last 30 seconds in a political arena like that. I mean, just to see, it's very intense. And so it's not necessarily my forte even to do that, but.
Yeah. And then, so one unprecedented event leads to another, which again is kind of plain. It's all wild that it plays out on Twitter or X, I guess formerly Twitter. But here Biden tweets out later on that he is dropping out of the primary.
Not the primary, the presidential election.
Yeah, the presidential election, and that he's suspending his re-election for 2024, and it's one of those things where it's like it's weird. That's another unprecedented thing, and people are already starting to draw conclusions. Like, is this connected? Did you do this for some other reason or what? And then from that, Kamala Harris is now the new candidate. Which again is another unprecedented event. So we're already living in this like kind of politically chaotic time of the world where it seems like politics used to be a little more simpler, at least when we were growing up. And now it's, to see people speak so hateful towards candidates online, and then to see that like elevated or escalated to real world violence is really shocking. And then you have this on the other hand, where it's like the presidential candidates are older than they've ever been. And someone like Biden, who was, at least in the debate he had with Trump, you could tell he was struggling. And it's just one of those things. That's not to bash him or anything. It's just, cognitively, he seemed to be struggling. And when you're considering this person to lead a country, that's tough, because you do kind of have to have someone who appears to be strong and has all their cognitive abilities. And so I don't know. It's one of those things where here we are again. And I think through all of this, people start to write narratives. And I think even in the Christian world, that brings up the sovereignty of God and what this means, if Trump was spared, but then this other man's life was taken, what does that mean for the sovereignty of God? And I think people want to try to write their own stories, want to write their own narratives about how God will put kings in and take kings out and that sort of thing. But also at the end of the day, we live in a fallen world, and we don't always have clear-cut answers for why things happen and play out the way that they do.
Yeah, it was interesting because, Eric, you and I were talking to Minister Mark, the other day just in the hallway and kind of talking about this episode. And just some of the historic things that have happened. And he was like sharing that he's had people, come up to him and mention like clearly, like, how could it be more clear that like God's hand is not on Trump, because this is a miracle. Like the fact that he's alive is a miracle. So that is like, there's clarity here. Like if there was never doubt that God is doing miracles, and once this person elected, then that's happening. And then he's like, and then I have people coming up to me saying, the biggest miracle. This has never happened. There's never been someone that, didn't go through the primary, didn't get selected by their party, and is now, less than 100 days out, the candidate to be able to run for president. It's almost, and people have made parallels to like Esther, for such a time as this, God has raised up someone. And so then they equate that to a miracle because it's never been done. There's no precedent for it, all that. And he's like, so we have people kind of writing these miraculous narratives for how something like this could happen. And then we do have these, okay, but God is the one in control, and he does, set up kings and kingdoms, and he's sovereign over all of this. But then you've got people bringing this theology, this lean, this bias. I think we can't deny that we have a bias no matter where for which one is more miraculous, and so on and so forth. And then yet you've got like the tragedy in two ways. You've got the tragedy of, hey, whether you like him or not, we have a president who's, at one point COVID's happening to him and all of this, and he's sick and not well, at least physically, for a few days. And so he was out of when he had, tweeted out that he was no longer running for president. And then you've got Corey, who's a man that loses his life in all of this, who, from what people know, is a believer, someone that's following Jesus, and you're wrestling with, okay, so how does this all play out? Like, where is God just this puppet master up there making all these things happen and making some tragedy and all that kind of stuff? And you can go find all of this on the internet. There will be people that will take their side of the miracle and which one's actually miraculous to the grave and do all that they can to discredit the other. And it's just this thing, I think, as Christians that we have to figure out. God says pretty clearly and seriously, we're not supposed to be using his name in vain. And a lot of times we're like, that's just saying OMG. And it seems when it fits our narrative, when it fits our desires, it becomes really easy to use God's name in vain as he is the backer of a campaign or whatever desires even I have in my own life. And I think we just have to be wise about it's a pretty big offense to God. Yeah. Pretty big offensive thing to God. And I think we just casually apply it, and it can just be messy and dangerous and take us to places that are bad really quickly, and ultimately dishonoring God in all of this.
One of the things that has been, I think, just a part of my spiritual journey in 2024 is just paying attention to the words that we speak over people, and that type of thing matters. And so in a situation like this where it makes me feel uncomfortable when we say God protected Trump, because automatically in the back of my head, but I'm like, but what about this guy? That was like, that sacrificed his life for his family. That to me like feels unbalanced when I start speaking this over that without taking this into account. And so I think it made me a little more sensitive as all of that was happening, of like, okay, and I didn't post anything about it, and I didn't put an opinion about it, because those two, that makes me feel uncomfortable.
I think, and it makes it, I mean, Alex, you mentioned like, this isn't just a game, right? Like, it's not just a political game. These are real people. And sometimes I think we get so wrapped up in maybe whether it's excitement or rooting for your side or whatever it might be, that you lose sight of that. And I think even when I saw that photo for the first time of him under the American flag and his fist in the air, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking of the way Biden was kind of stumbling through that debate. And then I see this photo, and I think I even tweeted something out, but like, it's a lock now. Like, it just seemed like because of this event, he has escalated himself to a place in the just in American consciousness that people are going to see him differently because of that. But then you have Biden drop out, and then here's this whole, tables are turning again. And it's almost like Trump kind of knew how to play his cards against Biden. And the catchphrases and the names he would call, and those types of things. He kind of has that figured out. And I noticed he's been tweeting "camablah" a lot lately, which is kind of funny. I guess I don't, because it doesn't mean anything, right? Like I mean, because her race has been called into question and all this sort of stuff. But it shows that like even in this political landscape that they just don't even, nobody really knows what's going on. Like, you can have your plans, you can have this idea of how things are going to play out. You can pretend to know, but the world is always changing. The world is always moving. Things are happening that we don't always understand, and they're beyond our control. And I think a lot of times when we try to force our religious belief in where God is in play in something, it does come from a place of control. It does come from a place of like wanting that comfort and knowing, and the idea that God's still on the throne is true. That's a truth that we believe, but we also, to me, that means I can have peace when things are chaotic. I can have peace when we're on stormy seas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like everything that plays out is meant to be ascribed our own, storyline, our own reasoning behind it. It's just sometimes chaotic things happen in a fallen world, and we can have peace and comfort knowing that God's on the throne, not that he's the ultimate chess master up there moving these pieces, or that all the political things that happen are spiritual warfare, where sometimes I think that's what we want to believe, that it's that, but no, those are the things of man. Those are the things of this world, the kingdom of this world, and God's kingdom is separate from that. And I think it's healthy to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think at the end of the day, if you're going to make a claim of miraculous either way, you just have to be honest about answering really tough, deeper questions about the sovereignty of God and how all that plays out. And I think for an onlooking world at Christians, oftentimes, those are some of the toughest things that people are wrestling with. People are wrestling with real deep theological questions about, we say that this God is really, really good, and yet we see evil happening in the world. We see, shooters walking into schools and killing kids. We see children dying of leukemia. Like, those are real tough questions to get into our theology about. And so, but then when we're just spouting out these miraculous things, but then discrediting the brokenness of the world, and it puts us in a weird spot if we're not willing to engage at the deeper levels of God's sovereignty and how it all works, and when it doesn't work in our favor, quote unquote. And so I think that's, it just reminded me a lot of all that. And there's a lot of people that I know that have walked away from some of their faith or the church because we're unwilling to engage in the deeper layers of the conversation, because we're too busy talking about, the higher, easy to see levels of the conversation, but we don't really want to engage in those other messy questions.
Yeah. Well, moving on to, I guess, public opinion in another form. The Olympics happen. Are they still happening?
They are finished.
They're done. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't pay that close attention, just a little bit.
We all know why. You're going to tell us why.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you why I was boycotting the Olympics. Kidding. Make that clear. I'm joking. No, but there was the opening ceremony that happened at the Olympics, and I didn't watch it, but man, let me tell you, my Instagram feed, Twitter feed, TikTok feed, Facebook feed,
it didn't let you get away from it, did it?
Filled with people outraged about this mockery that was happening, and I just kept seeing this man painted in blue and something that looked on a platter, and something that looked somewhat reminiscent of the Last Supper. And I thought, well, okay, what's going on here? Why are people getting up in arms? And Alex, can you explain it to me? Were the Olympics mocking the Last Supper? Is that what was going on here?
I think that's the statement that has been, made, was quickly made by a lot of Christians. If you put up the photo, of or screenshot, of what was happening in the Olympics celebration, and this person in the middle with kind of a halo looking thing, and then you're watching it all, and then there's a table with people on both sides of it kind of looking at this person. It quickly drew up French Renaissance art, pictures that people had seen of a famous painting called of the Last Supper, right? And so people very quickly, and I can see how visually, okay, you put those two things together, I can see, wow, this is just mockery on display. At this, if you're just looking at those two photos and someone is saying that's what they were trying to do, like probably pretty easy to convince someone of that reality. And yet I think it's also one of those reminders of the danger sometimes of doing some of those things and our need to react really quickly to things. I mentioned that earlier. I was with the with the presidential assassination, not presidential, but former president assassination attempt. Yes. Sorry.
Those are all the words.
I was just
all the words
swiping down, so fast because we want to know the information. We know at the same time when the world is talking about something, that's when, a lot of times that's when we need to speak and all those things. And I've learned, slowly but surely and through some mistakes that, okay, we need to let some of these things play out a little bit. Beforehand, but sometimes before letting them play out and asking the responsible questions and all that kind of stuff, they blow up pretty quickly into this. And man, I will say, if someone was just mocking, blatantly, the Last Supper and trying to kind of give the bad finger to Jesus and mock Christians, one, not supposed to be shocked by it. We say that's going to happen, but two, I'd be like, that's pretty reprehensible. I'm not a fan of that. And I would not be okay with that by any means. Yet at the same time, stepping back, which is kind of where I was joking with you. 'Cause then a lot of people based on that did boycott the Olympics and all those things. And so I think there's so much more that goes into.
And it's tough because it is rooted in French culture and in their art, and the painting of the Last Supper was something that it's not the only art that reflects that setting,
right?
And so I get why people drew the conclusion, and I guess I'm not here to definitively tell you how to think about it, but I would say be open to know that there is just as much potential that it was them celebrating their culture versus mocking your belief system. Like it is equally possible. And I think that's the thing that you have to remind yourself of before getting worked up, because I think into a tailspin because you saw a screenshot of something happening on social media.
I've been to Paris before. And so when I heard that the Olympics were there, I had even said to Ben, I'm like, this is it's going to be interesting. It's going to be different. Just like when it was in Japan 4 years ago, we had a lot of their culture pulled into it. I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of a toss up. What's going to come from the French? And I even talked to some of our friends, Marie and Nathan. Marie's on staff here, of just like living in that culture and being a part of it. Like it's hypersexual, and there's a lot of deep history that's around controversial things. And so I knew something was going to happen. And for me as a Christian, I don't know if you guys want to speak into this a little bit, but it makes me think about that rage that comes up as Christians when something offends us or something is put out like that, where they're not coming out right away and saying, hey, just so you know, this is not the Last Supper. You're going to think that, but this is what it is. Like, not identifying it, but that rage that can come up. I'm like, there is something in that where it's like, where is wisdom in that? What is the right thing to do? And I think we all have to ask ourselves that question because it's different. Like some people are better with words and you can wordsmith something. Like Alex, I think you're probably one of the best people I know with words, and you could probably have said something very amazing about that for us to all figure it out. But I think it's, how are we slowing down and engaging with our culture? And then I thought, as this is all happening, I'm like, what does God need me to do? Like, does he need me to come out like punching and swinging? Like, does he, what's my role with him? And so I'm like thinking about even my relationship, like, does he need me out there being?
Yeah, really.
And so it makes me think a little bit deeper just about my relationship and God, like, what do you need from me? And then, I mean, I saw something on social media that said, like, Jesus once wanted those people at the table. Like, what those people, like, we would have invited them, or he would have invited them, or he would have talked to them. And so,
or he did.
And he
I mean,
did.
he did invite
Yeah.
the guy that was about to betray him and, you know, have him posted up on a tree that we call a cross.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
And so, you know, culturally, how do those things, like, how, and I think that it's different for everybody. How do we defend him, and what's that righteous anger look like? And then what does that look like? And I think in there is wisdom. If something feels like it's moving too fast, you probably shouldn't be moving too fast. Like, and that's wisdom. Or,
Well, and I think like even what we had mentioned with kind of outrage culture is people rush to a conclusion. They rush to put their voice out there. And in that, there's almost if the facts came out and you're presented with new information and you realize maybe you were wrong about this, but you've already been the loudest on social media about how this is blasphemy or what have you. You see a lot of people at that point. I think that's where pride comes in and goes, okay, well, now I'm going to double down. Even though I've been presented with the facts, I'm going to double down because I don't want to have to feel shameful about being wrong. And so if you know that about yourself, that you're going to do that, you're going to double down even when you're wrong, like that's another reason to not post immediately, to not react immediately, but to wait and see and understand it better. Because I mean, I've seen that a lot too, where it's like, oh, okay, I've committed to this. This is wrong. This is shameful. And then you're like, oh, okay, actually it's not, but I'm not backing down. I'm still going to justify my beliefs because I don't want to look like a fool. But
yeah, that reminds me of the time that, like, we had a pretty big debate even on this podcast about the way toilet paper should be, and how I won that debate on social media, and still Jess is doubling down.
I think it was rigged. I think that poll was rigged.
And then that's what we say when we lose our, you know. Anyway, I'm totally kidding there. We know that the French, they love to create controversy. Look at French fries. That's been wrecking people's worlds for a very long time.
The most American things out there.
But yeah, to all of your points, before I digressed to that and took it to a totally weird place, because I'm a child at heart. There's this balance of, we are called to be salt and light and to speak truth into places that in our culture, lies are just being told. Like, it is our responsibility to speak truth into those spaces, because it's incredibly unloving to just let people, live in a lie. It's incredibly unloving to not, tell the truth in those spaces, and incredibly unloving to just, let, Jesus be mocked and make a mockery of him. And yet at the same time, what you were saying, Jess, it's like, but also, what is my role in that? And I do believe that God does call, specific people, that he has gifted them. For whatever reason, he's given them a platform to call out injustices, to call out things that, when people are marring the image and the name of Jesus, that they're supposed to help. I mean, I think of people like Dr. King, he went to battle, for people that are made in the image of God, and the truths that people were accepting were just anti-God. And they were seeing people as less than human, seeing people of a different race, and our black brothers and sisters, and they weren't using language like that. They were less than human, and they were being treated that way. And so God, I think, does rise up people, with prophetic voices to call out these types of things and behaviors that are unjust and are mocking him. And yet, I think sometimes we want to just make everything one of those battles. We want to maybe all find our own platform for that. And I thank God that he gives each of us unique spaces because of, I think, the things that have happened in our life, the injustices that we've seen, because I would not be able to bear the weight of the feeling of every injustice that happens in our world. And then to try to think that I've got some role in solving all of that, man, I'm exhausted. Just thinking, even the compassion fatigue we've talked about before.
Yeah. Well, and it didn't stop there. There was a female boxing match that happened during the Olympics with the winner of this match was Iman Khalif, and she won. And then suddenly there was a lot of backlash. I think because did she won by forfeit? Was that why it happened originally, or did her opponent, or did she actually? I didn't see what happened there. Like how Jess, you're shaking your head.
Well, there was a decision because
okay, it was a decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I knew her opponent had said something in an interview that she'd never been hit so hard in her life, and and then some of her past had come out with another event that she'd been a part of where she wasn't allowed to fight because of her testosterone levels, and soon that same old machine starts spinning up, and people were talking and calling this person trans and saying this is why we can't have trans athletes, in women's sports. They have an advantage. And it's like, I just barely heard that, and I don't even remember where I heard it from. Somebody probably posted it and said how awful this was. And, your gut reaction is like, I've seen this over and over, whether it's in swimming or whatever other types of sports. And I've kind of dismissed it as like, I don't know enough to get involved with that. It's just a sport thing. And sometimes to me, those competitive things, I don't get that worked up about. I'm like, whatever, it's just this. But maybe it's partially because I mentioned earlier, I am a boxing fan. And also I know what goes into that I just initially go, oh, well, if she's actually trans, like that is dangerous for, this female competitor to be in a fight with a trans person. That's actually, that is something that's concerning. And then I think the more you start to dig into it, there's more of a story here.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, I had heard it, obviously on social media, and, had a friend like, did you see it? Did you see that they're letting, a trans person, they phrased it, a man, beat up a woman, and, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, what? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's my first, that should not be happening in the Olympics of all places, because I had heard that there were swimmers that they said, hey, you can't be a part of this. There's a lot of decisions, and obviously a lot of things going into the decision right now on sexuality and people that are transgender in sports. And there's a lot of debate and outrage and all that stuff happening around this, and as there should be a lot of debate and things like that around this kind of stuff. But I was like, is that this? This seems weird, because you look into it, and Iman Khalif is the name of the Algerian boxer that ended up winning the gold medal. That was automatically being labeled trans. And then you look at it, and how people found out was they were not allowed to participate in the 2023 World Championships by the IBA, I think is the name of it, IBF, one of the boxing federations, because they were found to not qualify as a female boxer, and then they were allowed to be in the Olympics. But you look back at history, and both of those organizations, the IOC and other boxing organizations, had allowed them to box for years, before these tests were done. And then you find out more and more about this person, and find out that they have a DSD, which is a disorder. Oh my goodness. I had this word, and of course it's slipping me. A DSD. Yeah, so differences in sex development. And so they have a disorder, difference in sex development. They were at birth, identified by the doctor, their parents, as a female. As much as everybody knows, you can find all sorts of rabbit holes in this. They were raised, as a female. And then there's like, okay, in this, did they grow a penis or, some genitalia as a part of the life? I mean, this stuff really happens in the world, and it's very rare. I think like 1 in 20,000. So like less than 1% of people do these sort of things happen. But it's where I started to wrestle through it was we got to get the facts right in things like this, because if this is not a person that is trans, that was born identified as a gender and then transitioned later in life, because we do see this happen in sports and so on and so forth, then this is a different kind of story to talk about. But if we just project this story as if this very rare condition, this very rare story, as if it's a part of the fuller narrative of this debate happening, then when the facts actually come out that this isn't a trans person, that we've mislabeled it and we've used that as ammunition for our argument, but then the facts present themselves differently, then we start to create an erosion of trust in our arguments, even if we on our other side are arguing for the right thing and we're arguing with the right facts. We start to, by arguing without the full set of facts, we start to create this narrative of, it's kind of like our rights as Americans. We are innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. And we all want that, I think, in our own lives. If I'm going to court, heck yes, I want that. But in our world of social media, we are at large guilty until proven innocent. And man, when we talk about these things that are really, really sensitive in the world, I just think it demands us to make sure. That's why I want to get these things right before, making this a spectacle or a big part of my argument, because then it discredits the arguments that I have for legitimate gender conversations. And are there, is there a gender spectrum, or is it just male and female? All those kind of things, it gets murky and clouded when I begin to debate those things based on this.
Or even the grief and shame that it brings on this person and their family, like just to be talking about them that way. When it's like, that's not the truth. And like, how do you defend yourself in that moment? And you don't know how. And I think one of the things when we're talking about gender, you have like kind of the psychological side where there's, some people would believe that gender is on an emotional spectrum of like, how do I see myself? How do I identify myself personally? But then you also just have the cut and dry scientific side of that, where it is also on a spectrum where some women are born with more testosterone and some men are born with more estrogen, and and we all kind of start out in that embryo the same way, and that's just scientific truth. And so, but like you said, Alex, you can't. I've said this so many times previously on the podcast when it comes to conspiracy theories and things like that. If you're going to use lies to win an argument, and then mix that with the truth to win an argument, like you're the boy who cried wolf. You're not dependable. You're not trustworthy. And as believers in Christ, it hurts our witness to do this and to jump on these bandwagons without all the facts. You're not helping yourself in the long run, I don't believe.
Yeah, and I do think there's scientific facts literally about gender and why they're different. And I 100% believe that God made men and women, like that. Right. That in the garden, God said, hey, this is part of my plan. I'm uniquely, beautifully creating a woman. I'm uniquely, beautifully creating a man. Sin entered the picture. Yeah. And then there's a lot of mess that happens in there psychologically. And there's even some scientific or biological mess. And very rare, DSDs and this stuff is very rare. And most of the science, especially when we're talking about women competing in men's sports, there's some pretty good clarity about, as a dad of, 3 daughters, I have to think thoughtfully about this kind of stuff. And what advantages are really out there and all those kind of things that happen. And I think that's a conversation to have at some point. But this isn't that conversation. And then I think we've layered this as that conversation, which is, I think, where it gets messy and then gets political and then it gets religious and it gets all of those things, because it started out without us like looking at, okay, what's the reality of this one? And so that's become my tough, I guess, my issue with this headline and all the stuff that went into it.
Yeah.
I also think we watched this play out live. So maybe there was not all the facts to be had, but you saw somebody that was literally fighting, knowing this stuff was happening and being talked to and said about them. And they were going to the sidelines in tears because they're speaking their truth and no one is believing them. And there's celebrities and things going around online that were making fun and mocking this person. And I think even more than that, it's like, I saw a lot of comments on my social media about this, and it goes back to me even like how we judge people and, oh, well, you don't have big boobs, or I can't see your whatever underneath your little what do they wear? Just like their tight clothes that you wear at the Olympics. It's like, I can't see like your body parts and I can't figure this out. It's like, wow, we are grown adults like judging somebody that has more of a masculine look or whatever. And I'm just like, I was so disappointed because I'm like, obviously this person is fighting for, and I saw somebody that was saying like, I'm a girl, like I belong here. And everyone is like, yeah, right. Well, you look like a dude. Yeah. And that to me maybe is raw, but it's just like, it's hard to interact with that. And then I feel like the Olympics is it's a professional, prestigious thing. And so it was heartbreaking to see that play out. And now, I mean, you see like this week, she's coming and there's lawsuits that are coming against cyberbullying of big names that used her name in different places on their platforms. And so this isn't over, but I think.
Well, again, these people who have doubled down on this argument before having the facts, and where does that leave you? Where does that? I mean, people don't. I don't know. It's just not worth it to win an argument and then ultimately be wrong. And I don't know. It's messy.
And there were two boxers that were in this, that were at the centers of the controversy. And I just don't know, like all the kind of research I had done, was not on, I think a Taiwanese boxer or, something like that. All the research I did, because most of what I was seeing was, on Amon Khalif. And so I don't know. And that's why I'm like, I'm not going to comment on, the other boxer where, people were making these allegations and the other boxer that was disqualified from the 2023, World Championships, but then was allowed in the 2024 Olympics. Like I don't know, but I'm just saying I know there's another one out there, and I don't know what the specifics are about that, because each one is unique, each person is unique, each one of their stories would be unique, and so I haven't done all the research on that, but I think it's important to also mention we're not just overlooking that or trying to play up one person when there's another thing. It's just only got so much time of the day and research to do, and that's why it's important to talk about.
Well, what's it saying, James? Right? Slow to anger. I think that can kind of wrap up our conversation here. Just like, let's be slow to make these decisions, these judgment calls, and how we respond to them, I think is important. And it says a lot about us, our witness, our integrity, and who we are as people. And I mean, there's going to come a day when there's something you're going to need to fight for. There's going to come a day when there's someone you need to fight for. But what does that mean? Like when you're carrying all this baggage of sounding these alarms that don't amount to much or are misinformed. It's challenging. We live in challenging times. We live in confusing times, and we live
in a culture that slowing down is countercultural.
Yep.
And so us sitting here having these conversations saying, slow down, that's not us backing off and saying, oh, well, let's just be humble and do everything. It's like,
just
there
be a bunch of pacifists. That's not what we're saying.
There's more to it. What we're saying and what we're trying to practice in our lives is countercultural in a fast-paced, jump in and make a decision world.
Yeah.
And so that's not what we're going for, but it's like, what are our options? Maybe slowing down is uncomfortable. Like, let's get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm talking to myself too.
We're uncomfortable. You did it. I'm uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable right now. No, it's true. Yeah, it's there's a lot more we could get into, but I think we covered it. That was our summer recap. A lot going on. Wow. Guess we can't take a month off again, or everything just blows up.
Especially during a presidential and Olympics year.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll make that vow now. 4 years from now, I'm not ready to make that vow.
Oh, no, yeah, you need your July. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening wherever you might be. If you have any questions or concerns based on what you heard today, you can send those to Mark Ashton. No, I'm just kidding. No, you can send us an email at podcast@cccomaha.org. You reach out to us on social media, on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast. Or one of the most fun and exciting ways to reach out to us is voicemail. You can call and leave your message, maybe in response to this, or if you have another question for us, at 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.